say thank you to a few people before we get started. First off, my wife let me do this and putting up with me for the last 6 months putting this together. It shouldn't have taken that long, but it did. My dad, who's doing all the cooking, he has spent several hours last night and today working really hard to get the food ready for us. So about 11:45 we'll start the tech sessions. Chuck, the guy in the M3 shirt here, is in charge of the tech sessions. So one's going to be on the CD43 upgrade for the older BMWs and iPod interface and some other knowledge and tidbits he's collected doing that. Jeff is going to give us a tech session on gasohol and how it affects our vehicles and fuel lines and how to prevent some unnecessary corrosion. And Chris has been kind enough to do a roving tech session where he's going to go around and explain some things with our cars, which I'm looking forward to that one a whole lot. But food will be served probably around 12:15-ish. I'm going to bump it back a little bit. So food will be served at 12:15. If you don't have a little red ticket, because that's what I'm using to pay for your lunch, get with Shane. He's in charge of passing out tickets and check your name off. So most of you, not all of you, have already paid for your food, so make sure you go in. Otherwise, one more thing, we have a surprise at 1 o'clock. The ice cream truck will be here. And agreed to escort us from this park to the parkway entrance. So we need to be lined up, well, ready to go at 2 o'clock.
Make sure your parking tickets are already paid.
Yeah. But they said if they're not directing traffic for us, they're supposed to stop traffic and let us go through the red light. If they're not there doing that, please obey the traffic laws. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Oh, and on the parkway, I'll be in the lead. I'm not going to go over 45 because I don't want a federal ticket. So, but yeah, we'll leave here too. Otherwise, enjoy yourself. Thank you all for coming again, and we'll be eating soon. Chuck has the tech sessions. Have a good one.
Thanks for doing it.
Thanks.
With my son's help, I don't know if I'll get him to comment on this, but we did this a couple of years ago. And my whole theory, if you call it that, about doing any upgrade is to do it is, I mean, I really have to think about it before I want to butcher, you know, my car. If I like the original radio, I'll get into this thing in a minute, but the original radio, you know, I took out and I put it in a box. I've got it in here, I didn't print it off for you, but the original wiring, I made a Excel spreadsheet. So if I should ever sell the car or whatever, I've got the original radio, I've got an Excel spreadsheet with all the wires, the original colors, what I soldered new leads onto, and what the wiring. So even if 10 years something happens and I get a short in there, I can go back to my original diagram and say, hey, what's going on here? But I did convert the original radio in that car to a CD43, which, are you guys familiar with the CD43, the in-dash CD player? It's the last DIN size that'll fit in our car. After that, they went to that elongated, I don't know if you guys have seen the newer BMWs, you know, they have a CD43 that, you know, it's the in-dash unit, but it's not the big square DIN. So this is the last one, and it's a great upgrade for our car.
What is CD43 mean?
It's a good question. That is the model number of the unit from BMW.
Oh,
it's the in-dash, you can look at it here in a minute when we get finished, but it's the in-dash CD unit that came in an E36, and it came in the Z3, and it came in those cars, I want to say it's about 2000, correct me if I'm wrong, but it will fit in our car. Now the first thing, I'll go through this in a minute, you do have to, and I brought this panel here. You've got to grind, you've got to take a Dremel and cut that inner lip out for it to slide in flush. Some people install it and leave it, you know, proud by, you know, 3/16 of an inch. But that's what you got to do to mechanically to get in it. But okay, so let's go over the paper here. The material you need, the CD43, you need the unit itself. You can check eBay, and then you can check German eBay. And if you guys ever go there for our parts, ebay.de, and they're all over the place over there, and it's a little bit better price. Of course, you're going to deal with the dollar-euro conversion. The problem I see when I find them on our eBay is they're Rover units, and they'll take the little M badge and it goes on our wheels, or the newer model of M car wheels, and they'll turn it up sideways and they'll stick it over the little Rover symbol. That's not, it's the same unit. When LePunk made it for our car, or BMW, they made it for them. So that's just a badged Rover unit. And I went with the USA Spec iPod interface. You know, there's a number of those units out there. I think Dice is one. Denison Dice, you can go to your BMW dealer and they have a iPod interface as well. And then you're going to need the adapter cable when you talk to USA Spec that adapts the CD changer. So I'll continue that in a minute. And then you need the 17-pin connector, and that's that part number, and it's aftermarket. Then you need a 3-pin power wire connector, and there's the part number. And then you need a data cable. You need to either, the short one is if you have a CD player in your glove box, or the long version if you want to put your iPod in the trunk. And I think all this will make sense in a minute. Then you need a snap-in contact for pin number 7, and you need 14 gauge wire, silver solder, and heat shrink. Okay, so let's get this first paragraph out, and then I'll let you guys ask me some questions. Remember, you're installing a CD43 into an E30, but when you're ordering parts above, you're installing a Nakamichi CD unit into your 2000 Z3. No one in the world except us knows what we were doing. When I started this and you called around and you asked for these part numbers, like, what are you doing? We don't even know what you're talking about. So you have to act like you got a 2000 Z3 and say, listen man, I've got this CD player in my dash and I want to put my iPod in there. Oh, okay. So then all of these parts above will make sense. But if you tell them what you're doing to an E30, I know I'm repeating myself, they're like, we can't help you, and they'll hang the phone. So you have to kind of fool them, and that's how you do it. So the 17-pin connector, if you take your original E30 radio out, you know, you've got the connector on the back, you're going to have to buy that 17-pin connector and solder that and wring out those wires. And I didn't even get into the whole issue of wringing out your wires, other than if you turn to page 3, this diagram is going to tell you this 17-pin connector that is going to become a part of your car, soldered in place. And then all this will tell you left front positive, left front negative, etc., etc. So if I got everybody at least to that, this is a pretty detailed conversion here. So that's your first step. Now the 3-pin power wire. Okay, hold on, let me back up. Your 17-pin connection replaces your E30 Hardy. No more, no less. You've got to wring out your wires. Now on our car, you guess you guys are familiar with the E30 has a common ground. Common ground on your car? All the negatives around the speakers was one wire grounded somewhere. Yeah. So when I say that you're going to have to deal with your common ground issue, you're going to have to rewire your car for a CD43. And you're going to have to run new left and positive and negative to each speaker. The 3-pin power wire connects the 12-volt positive red wire, a brown wire, and an iBus signal to pin 7. And I know that's Greek, so let me start right there. The 17-pin connector on the back, and of those 17 pins, when you look at it, there's the number 7 position, and if you turn to page 4 and you look at this diagram, and I think all this will make sense here in a minute. You look at this diagram right here. Pin 7 is blank. So what I'm saying is this 3-pin power wire that connects to your Denison unit that you're going to, or your iPod that goes in the glove box, has got to communicate to your radio on pin 7. And you do that by that part number, that snap-in contact. You buy that little snap-in contact, which is no more than just it's a round female metal connector. You're going to solder a wire onto it. It's going to be snapped into that 17-pin connector that you've got in it's part of your wiring harness now, and then that connects to your Denison, or in my case, my USA Spec CD adapter that is in my glove box. Got any questions?
I have an overall question.
Yeah.
First of all,
this is pretty
I don't
complicated.
Have an 30,
yeah.
But what are the advantages of having this set up in the first place?
That's a good question.
Why do you want to do this?
Yeah, see, I already went. Okay, if you want to listen to your iPod in your car, I guess the old way that you had to do it was through a FM signal, unless somebody's figured out another way.
I mean,
so this allows you to charge your iPod and leave it in the car. It replaces the CD function of, if you had a CD player, because these Z3s and the E36s had the ability to have a CD player in their trunk or in their glove box. And the iPod goes in that position. If you got 1,000 songs on your iPod, then you just use that iPod in your car. So it really modernizes
an aftermarket radio to start with. I mean, what's the advantage of this over rather buying an Alpine or Pioneer or Sony or something that has the iPod?
That's a good question. I think for originality, this is probably your last step for originality to keep
that's
it.
What I was thinking.
The other, you could probably go to Blapunk, and they're made in Germany. Or this radio is made by Blapunk, or you can go to an Alpine unit. That's true.
So I mean, it's about having a stock looking.
It's about the stock, and then once you take, and Dremel this out, and it slides in. It says BMW Business Unit. It does match.
Yeah.
For the most, the texture's off a little bit, but I won't. It's close. That's a good question. Okay, so I know that's pretty complicated, but if I can kind of review, if you got to start with that 17-pin connector, and you solder that into your wiring your harness in your car, and it's missing that one connection, which is pin 7 of that diagram. And when you buy that little female connector and slide it in, and it snaps in, then that enables you to connect to your iPod in your dash.
problems you'll experience here. Reduces fuel economy, obviously. Accelerates engine wear. Causes the engine to run hotter because it's trying to do the same amount of work with less energy to do it with. Less efficiency, and it causes vapor lock in cars with carburetors. And I think there's only one couple with a carbureted car here right now, but we see this a lot because that's my line of work, is antique car carburetor and fuel pump restoration. I don't fool with the fuel injection. It just the stuff boils at a lower temperature than gasoline does, so it's sort of like a vicious cycle. The engine gets hotter, and the fuel standing in the lines boils quicker. You do the math, so you end up with a lot of that vapor locking, especially in the carbureted stuff. Now, organically based ethanol is very difficult to get it to mix with gasoline. That's a petroleum-based product, okay? Just two chemicals are at cross purposes with one another. And they have a tendency to separate after they do get mixed. They have a tendency to separate in the presence of moisture. We're talking just a little bit of moisture will do the job. And what happens is the heavier ethanol and water go to 6 o'clock in the gas tank. It definitely does not want to run on pure ethanol or ethanol mixed with water. The gasoline that's still standing on top isn't very good either anymore, because once you take the ethanol out of it, it's actually used as an octane enhancer. Don't ask me how something that's less energy efficient can do that, but that's the claim, is that the gasoline will drop 3 octane points anytime you separate the ethanol from it. Okay. For our purposes here today, what I'm going to focus on is the fact that it is harmful to organic rubber. Organic rubber is what most fuel hoses were made of, and that was okay before ethanol and fuel injection. But since the advent of fuel injection, which preceded ethanol obviously, you need to use a fuel hose with what's called a fluoroelastomer liner. Now, this is very easy to identify because it'll be stamped with SAE 30R9. Okay, that's very important. It's in your handout. Don't use the stuff with SAE 30R6 or 30R7 stamped on it, because that's got the organic rubber liner in it. And it's only made for mechanical fuel pump pressure, not the high pressures that fuel pumps, electric fuel pumps or fuel injection systems generate. There is a figure from Gates Corporation, and by the way, I do recommend the Gates fuel injection grade hose, because it seems to go on, if you're using generic hose, I mean, I buy the BMW stuff, but if you're using generic hose you can get at the auto parts store, get the Gates, not other brands that have like a blue liner in them. That stuff, it's the devil to get onto the fitting, and it also doesn't clamp as well. The Gates stuff, it's got the black liner in it, looks just like factory hose, works beautifully. Give you another little tip that's not in this. By the way, while I'm thinking about it, hoses that are hard to get on and even harder to get off, you know how to make them easy to get on and off? Put some dielectric grease on. Dielectric grease does not rot any kind of rubber product. And it'll go on there, and years later you can get fuel hoses, vacuum hoses, water hoses off of those fittings without destroying the hose, or in case like a heater core, the heater core itself. I digress. Anyway, use the fuel injection grade hose exclusively. Gates says that 90% of the gas hose sold today at the auto parts stores is not fuel injection grade. It's the SAE 30R6 or 30R7. Folks, you do the math. Is there a single vehicle built in the world today that, well, okay, maybe somewhere way far away, but in a third world country, that's carbureted instead of fuel injected? No, of course not. So these people are all driving time bombs that are putting this this low pressure organic rubber fuel lines on their cars. It shouldn't go on any car. If you got a carbureted vehicle, you use the fuel injection grade hose, because it's only going to last maybe 18 months. The other stuff, before it eats right through the liner and seeps through the outer casing. On the pressure side, that'll blow gasoline all over your hot engine. On the intake side, the vacuum side, that stuff will suck shut. Just like that on the suction side of a fuel pump. I don't care whether it's mechanical or electric. And it's just the liner, see, that's what fails first. And you could be hanging under the car like Robert De Niro in Cape Fear, looking up at it when it happened, and you wouldn't see it. It all happens internally. So just do yourselves a favor, and whatever vehicle you got, put the fuel injection grade hose on it. Also, visit a site called pure-gas.org. At this site, you will find stations which, at least at the time somebody reported them to be, were carrying gasoline without ethanol in them. How did this come to pass? How can this be that they don't all have to carry gasohol? Well, when the farmers started lobbying for this, particularly the corn farmers, they knew that it was bad news. They knew that they weren't going to be able to use this in their gasoline-powered farm vehicles, however many of those still exist, without problems, and they wrote themselves a nice exemption into the mandate for the ethanol. So a certain number of stations in rural areas still have to be allowed to carry the stuff if they're willing to, and if their supplier is willing to deliver it to them. And it's usually in a pump that's very clearly marked no ethanol. Sometimes it's only available in one grade at a gas station. Sometimes it's available all 3 grades. Pure-gas.org will tell you, but I strongly suggest you verify before you go out of your way to buy gas there that they're still carrying it, because some of those do get disconnected, discontinued, excuse me, usually because the carrier decides not to deliver that stuff to the gas station anymore, from what I understand. So you're more likely to find it at stations in rural areas. Another thing you can do to mitigate it, this is not the same as having ethanol-free gas, believe me, but it helps, is Sta-Bil Marine Formula, STA-BIL. And the reason Marine Formula is it was developed to try to help the people with the fiberglass gas tanks in their boats initially, because when that stuff would separate, all that concentrated ethanol at the bottom of the gas tank would eat right through the epoxied seam in the fiberglass gas tank. Guess what happened in a boat sitting in the water? You had water full of gas and a boat full of water, okay? And so that's where it came about. Well, then the small engine people started to realize, hey, this stuff is ruining our carburetors and our engines too, so they started marketing it. What Marine Formula Sta-Bil does is it keeps the ethanol and the gasoline from separating.
Fuel is there, and it's not a giant leak, but it's a